Hello, everyone. I'm Katarina Sostaric, and this is Abhi and Michael. And we are part of a larger team that's working on this project to basically make it easier to track exactly what our legislators are doing and who they're maybe being influenced by. So this is a very basic diagram of our kind of lawmaking process. We have legislators are coming into office through donations from campaign contributors. While they're in office, they're receiving gifts from lobbyists, and then eventually they will vote on legislation that will become the law in Missouri. And what's interesting, I think this is, I think all states probably need more transparency in terms of what their state legislatures are doing. But in Missouri, it's specifically interesting because we have no limits on campaign contributions or lobbyist gifts. And we're actually the only state to have that kind of double lack of limits. So the main problem is that all the information, the votes that legislators are putting on these votes, the campaign contributions, the lobbyist gifts, this information is all public, but it's all very spread out and not easy to access unless you really know what you're doing. So for any random member of the public, they wouldn't necessarily know how to find this information. Some of the data that is available, such as the roll call votes that are taken in the Senate and House every day, are not usable, which means you can't put them in a database, you can't aggregate them or sort these votes in any way. So you can't look at a legislator's votes over time and how those might be changing or not changing. And it takes way too much time to discover any influence that donations and gifts might be having on a legislator's vote because of the way that this information is currently kept. So our solution is to put all of these pieces of information that are coming from different places into one giant database that will then become a public website. It would include lobbyist gifts, information about legislators, the way they're voting on bills and on amendments, legislative committees they're a part of, and also contributions that they're receiving to their campaigns, so that you would be able to easily sort and access data to discover any of these connections that might be there, and to just see any sort of routine action that's going on in the legislature. So there's these questions that right now you can't really answer without a ton of work that would be able to answer with a simple click on a computer screen. So right now, if you wanted to know your state's representative's voting record on gun-related legislation, that seems like something that you should be able to easily access, but actually you can't without going through multiple House and Senate journals, finding all the days that this kind of legislation was voted on, and then having to find the way that your legislator voted. So it's hours and hours of work that would go into answering a question like that. How do a state senator's roll call votes correspond to the timing and source of lobbyist activity? This is something you'd have to go to first. You'd have to go through the House and Senate journals on the House and Senate websites, and then compare that to information from the Missouri Ethics Commission website. So again, a ton of work. And how often does my Democratic state senator vote with or against the Democratic Party? Again, something that would take hours and hours of looking through different journals. So what we did first to make this database and website happen, we went through these daily journals to figure out exactly what was in them and how we could find different keywords that would be useful in scraping that data to get into the database. We were corresponding with staff at the Capitol and the Missouri Ethics Commission to figure out what data they had. And we found out some interesting things, like the Senate still uses pencil and paper to record votes in the Senate. So not exactly close to having an automated system that would make everything highly transparent. We had to decode the data and then pass that information on to the informatics team. And just an example, this is a screenshot of a PDF of a roll call vote in the Senate Journal. So imagine if you wanted to find how your senator voted on something, you would have to scroll through a PDF that's dozens of pages long and find this little section and find how your senator voted. So aggregating one senator's votes is nearly impossible currently, until I will now pass it over to the informatics team.
So as she gave a lot of background about the overall picture and the details of how we got to where we are right now. And we created a big database, and which is, I think, mostly done. Uh, as you can see, we are scraping data from various different sources. The Open States API for legislative committees and legislator information. We also had some campaign committee information, roll call votes. So Mike has been working on that, and he has been scraping the PDFs. So if you can imagine, there is a text document, and you are just trying to find out what there is in there. A human eye can actually see it very easily, but when it comes to a software, you have to make sure which one is a vote and which one is not a vote, or which one is a name and which one is just a sentence. So to do that, that is kind of a tedious and a pretty challenging task, and we have been working on that and created a pretty decent database. And that is, I talked about database. This is called an entity relationship diagram, which I don't think any of you have to worry about. It just says how the whole database is laid out. And Billy the data scraper, that is where all the information for the bills are located. That's another API which has bills, votes, results, session information, past results, or whatever results are. So all those information has to be scraped. So if you just see each of these are tables, each of these have information about bills or bill result. Almost every information in each of these tables that we call in database is coming from different sources. So there is no one data warehouse or a data hub that has all the information. And to bring all that information is all in different formats. So we have to make a generic format first out of all the different data. So that is another challenging task. The next phase is, now that we are done with creating the database, we have to create the front end of the website, which has all the information as to like some kind of analytics, which shows that how many votes a bill received and whether it passed or not, what session, or how productive is the current state Congress. Because if there are these, or how many, or if you want to go deep down to an individual senator or a congressman and see how many votes they introduce, or how many bills they introduce, excuse me, and what happened to those bills. Again, she mentioned some of the queries that will be answered as to how often does this senator vote against the party, or what is he pro-gun, or all those kind of predictions can be made using this kind of a data hub, you can say, or information hub for the Missouri Senate and Congress. And that's it. Yep. Any questions? Yeah.
How long did it actually take you to go from the beginning, from the original idea to the stage you're on right now?
The idea, I think, was brought by the journalism school, or Mike, I think.
When did you guys actually begin? I guess I have to ask Katarina whenever she actually began this endeavor.
Well, we began this at the beginning of the semester, so mid-January, beginning of February. And it just took, I was working with another journalism student, Madeline O'Leary, to do all the research, like kind of the ground research, to find where all this data is and what exactly we need. Also working with Ryan Famuliner, our mentor. And then eventually, once we kind of started with that, we started meeting with the informatics team, and it's been just kind of a collaborative process from then on. So, yeah.
I'll add one comment to that. So basically, from my standpoint, Abhi and I, we understand data. We actually have absolutely no idea how to interpret this data. As far as political knowledge, our understanding is very limited. So really, we were just relied on the journalism folks to basically interpret this and actually paint the picture of how all of this data interplays with one another. Because really, that's the powerful part about this, is taking all of these interacting pieces of information and actually combining them back together so that we can see the full picture of what's really happening.
Yeah, this is a great next step to David Herzog's, a fellow here a couple of years ago, Open Missouri project. He identified all these databases, but your project to try and pull the data into a usable format is a great next step. I know that the Ethics Commission has been pretty friendly in sharing data, and it's easier to use that data because it can come to you in a format or an API. The PDFs, are you having to convert them back to text to get out of the image process? And have you talked with the state about trying to get that in a more usable format? Have they resisted that?
So actually, I'll make one comment first about that process of scraping the PDFs. It is challenging to actually extract that text and have it be preserved in the exact manner you would view it in the PDF. During that conversion process, it's often the case that information is swapped around and you can lose the order. So PDFs just sort of create this additional obstacle of encryption to actually get the information we're interested in. But I'll have to forward the remaining part of that question.
Yes, so we have visited with people at both the Senate Administrator's Office and the House Chief Clerk, which they're both kind of in charge of these daily journals and how the information is stored. And it was interesting talking to them because they were saying things like, well, first it's stored in PDFs because it's not a changeable file format. So if they have this, they want this like permanent record of what goes on in the chambers every day. And so one of their reasons for having PDFs is that you can't like change the file. It's an image. You can't change the text inside of it once it's posted to the web. So that's one reason for it. Also, just slow pace of change. They have 3 different bodies. So like I mentioned, the Senate Administrator, the House Chief Clerk, and then also the Legislative Research Committee. All 3 of those bodies are making decisions on how information, these Senate journals are stored, and unless they all come to an agreement, that can't be changed. And they're just using very like antiquated methods of literally pretty much typing up these House journals by hand. Nothing's automated. So while some of them are very open to technological advancements, it's a question of funding. It's a question of will they agree on it. There's just, if anything's going to happen, it's going to take forever.
Well, so let me follow that up. Now that you know the technical challenges, how likely is it that you'll ever be in a place where you can create this master database? And if you do, how will it have been worth it in terms of the ability of journalists and citizens to actually use that data in interesting ways?
That question exactly why the make predictions part. That's what the vision is, that we don't want to be limited to what we have. We want to take that data and go further and try and understand what this data means. What is the pattern here? And what is the pattern of each and an individual? This is where the machine learning kicks in, because once you have the data, it's just not going to lie there. We are going to do predictions on it just so that we can understand what they might do. And that is what is newsworthy, right? You always coin something and then it just blows up on social media. So that is exactly the point here, that even though we might not get more data, which I don't see a reason why not, but in the event that we don't, prediction part will take care of at least some news content, if not anything or more.
Great work, thank you. Oh, do we have one more question? Yeah, Ed, go ahead.
Now, I was just wondering if you also had been thinking about obtaining information from other news sources to be able to include in the data that you collect. Like, you know, if it appeared in the Columbia Missourian or something.
We haven't, I don't think we have thought about that at all, but one thing that we do also want to do besides having this as an independent website, as an end product, we also would like to have an application that news sites could embed on their websites if they wanted to, so that they could have this information just automatically available on their site. That's something that would be ideal.
It seems like it might be a kind of project where you could get other people involved to collect information. That's what I was thinking.
Okay, yeah, if you want to help out, it's always welcome. Thanks.